Whoever coined the statement, "You can't pick your family," didn't know Ed. Right, Michael? Many of you knew that Ed referred to me as Sis. So I think I should begin by explaining the reason for that, even though Ed and I were actually cousins. Ed's mother, this is a history lesson for the younger generation, Ed's mother, Mabel Wilhide Downey, and my father, George Wilhide, were sister and brother, and they were very close siblings. My father died when I was young, and Mabel and Milo took a special interest in looking after me, as Mabel said she knew George would want her to do. And especially during my college years, when the house on Beechwood Road became my second home. Mabel, who had two lovely sons, Bob, who is here today, and Ed, began to call me the daughter she never had and always wanted. Mabel and Milo both experienced long illnesses, and I took care of both of them. And during that time, Ed and I became even closer. And he began to refer to me as his sister, and thus the name Sis and Brother Ed began. I'd like to now share with you what I consider to be the highlights of who Ed was from my perspective, and thus I've created the top 10 traits of Ed list, which have impacted my life and many others here as well as we celebrate Ed's life. Although Lisa, I have to say I may have to delete number 2 after what you said. First, hardworking, perseverant problem solver. Ed never met a problem he didn't want to tackle. He did not give up easily, which is why he was so successful in all that he attempted. Not only did he benefit from his problem-solving skills, but many of us here have benefited as well from his expert problem-solving. Most important, he set high standards in problem-solving, not just for himself, but for all of us. And he constantly reminded us to strive to reach those standards. And thus, Ed helped make all of us better people. The second one that, Lisa, you made me iffy about is that he was ethical. But Ed was ethical and honest, and he was successful while being ethical and honest. Ed held the conviction that one must know right from wrong, although he did push the limits, and live by the golden rule. And he did just that, and he set an example for all of us to follow. Third, Ed was ingenious and just plain smart. His mother said he was born smart. Mabel loved to tell the story about how she did an IQ test on Ed before he started to school. I don't know if the grandchildren have heard this, but Mabel, who was a teacher, tested his IQ and then went into school and promptly told the teachers, as he began elementary school, just how smart he was. They obviously didn't appreciate that. Ed told me on the side that she actually tutored him to the test, and that he really wasn't all that smart. But we know he was. We know that his intellect and ingenuity also helped him solve many problems, and he loved solving problems and helping people in doing so. Fourth trait, Ed was humble. He was proud of where he came from. We, on the Wilhide side of the family, were farmers who immigrated from Germany, and I don't remember the Downey genealogy, although I do have a copy of it. But I know that recent generations descended from the same background. And his father was on the University of Maryland faculty in the Department of Agriculture, as well as head of 4-H, of which Ed was extremely proud. But I must add, I never knew Ed to be boastful. And I hope he wouldn't mind my talking about all of his wonderful traits today. Fifth, he was generous and generative. He was always trying to help others, generous with family, friends, organizations, and causes if he thought he could make a difference. He and Loretta, many of these things apply to you as well, but we're not celebrating your life today, so I'll stick to Ed. Have generously supported work in education, medicine, which was extremely important to Ed, and the arts, just to name a few, in order to advance these important areas that impact quality of life for all. Ed was humorous. Ed was witty. He had a great sense of humor. He was funny, or at least he thought so. And he was tricky in his younger years. I remember my mother telling me a story about how when he and brother Bob were young, and Bob, I think I'll clarify this by saying I believe you were about 4 years old and Ed was about 6 years old, you visited my parents, and Uncle George and Aunt Margaret used to give you pennies. And Ed tricked Bob into giving him his pennies so he could show him how to do a trick with them. He took Bob's pennies and dropped them down the heat register, which if you were born after 1950, you won't know what that is, but it was something in the floor with slots. And he took Bob's pennies and showed him how he could drop them through the register on the floor so they would make a clang when they hit the cellar floor. He thought that was hilarious. Ed frequently made me laugh. He made me laugh up even until a few days before he died. He said things with a straight face that you might not catch if you weren't paying attention and didn't know him. Number 7, Ed was a neatnik. Ed was a bit particular from my perspective. He liked things just so. And sometimes just so meant his way. I say this with love in my heart. And one of the last examples of this that I can remember brought chuckles to the nurses who cared for him, and one of those nurses is here today, as well as myself over the last few months. We had to line up all his vehicles, meaning the wheelchair and the walker, in what he called the parking lot, which was located in the hall outside his bedroom. And we had to do it just so. Brakes on, positioned at the right angle, etc., which I never got quite right. And the trash can had to be in the exact right spot as well, and so on. And he said to me, "Ibby, you should know by now, I'm a neatnik, and things have to be just so." So, of course, I did my best to suit him. Ed was loyal and patriotic. He stood by family, friends, and country, and especially those of the right political party. He did his part to help our country. Not only did he serve in the Korean War, but before the Korean War, both he and Bob, who were too young to serve in World War II, did their part by collecting scraps of metal as they wandered around College Park. Of course, I would be remiss in not mentioning his loyalty to the University of Maryland, from which many of us in this family and in this chapel today got our academic start in life. I'm a 3-time graduate of Maryland, and Kate, who just finished her freshman year, is here today. And Kate, he was so proud of you. Last, Ed was brave. As Ed faced his final days, he had no regrets. He was ready to go. And he traveled bravely through the valley of the shadow of death, and he was not afraid. Ed indicated that he would like for a reading from Psalms to be part of this service. So I'll now read the 23rd Psalm from the Wilhide Family Bible. And hopefully it won't fall apart, because it was published in 1876. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.